Hello everyone, welcome to my online prep. Today we'll be starting with part 1 of chapter 24, that is leading in a VUCA and Bani scenario, new approaches in crisis management. In this chapter, we'll be learning about the concept, definition, features and sources of a crisis. Then we will see the concept, features and needs of crisis management, 4 levels of uncertainty and the strategies to manage them. We will study about the VUCA model, that is the gravity-driven approach to uncertainty and crisis management in organizations. We will also study about the evolution of Bani approach in crisis management. Then we will study which vision is to be used by organizations to deal with the crisis. So let us start with the first topic. First, let us understand what is the need of these approaches in the crisis management. Now, the world is becoming more and more uncertain because of increasing competition, globalization, and the universe in which we now live is a connected society where changes are taking place in a fast-paced, constant, and unpredictable manner. So, it is very common for crisis to occur in the rapid advancements in technology with the use of internet, smartphones, and social media. Here, a series of uncertainties and crises. These are very natural to occur. They have increased the sense of turbulence, danger, and unpredictability in certain areas. Now, if organizations they do not put in place a preemptive, robust, and integrated disaster management plan that coexists with effective and resilient business continuity plans, then this crisis can lead to huge disastrous effects for the organization. So they need to put in more investment and additional cost so that they can be ready to manage such crises in the world of constant change, so as to denote the gravity of such uncertainties and occurrence of certain crises. Two new terminologies have emerged. This is the VUCA and Bani scenarios. We will in this chapter study about these approaches. First, before that, we will see the concept of crisis and crisis management. First, let us start by defining what is a crisis, a sudden or we can say unexpected event that leads to major unrest in amongst the individuals in the workplace or the organization can be stated as a crisis. It can be anything that poses a serious threat to the health and future of a business operations, finances, reputation, and or its people. Crisis can be said of something that has a high impact, low probability, unexpected, and unique. It has a high impact on all the stakeholders of the organization. It can disrupt the individual's normal or stable state. It has low probability. We do not expect, then only it will be said of as a crisis. That is, it is sudden and it is unexpected. It has the potential to highly impact a business. Now, the definition of high versus low impact is very subjective. For some companies, the possible loss of a key customer can have a high impact and it might be considered as a crisis. For others, they might view it simply as a part of doing business. It might not be of very high impact for other companies. So, another thing is that there's usually a low probability of the crisis. So, when it occurs, it is unexpected. It is a sudden event. In addition, a crisis might be just affecting a single business or it can also impact the entire industry. For example, structural events in the nation can impact the whole industry as a whole. It can create disruptions or business cycles even. Now, a crisis isn't the same as a disaster. Disaster is the outcome or consequence for the society. It is when the crisis is not controlled and it leads to a bad ending. When a crisis is perceived to be really having a bad consequence, then we speak of a catastrophe. A crisis isn't the same as disaster, but it can quickly become a disaster if we do not manage them. On the other hand, if we manage a huge crisis on early stages, we try to correct them, then we can stop it from becoming a disaster. So these things, they make the definition of crisis clear. It is having a high impact, low expectation, and unique. It is a sudden impact, high impact on the working of the organization. Now, like we said, each organization has different definition of the impact of crisis. It is subjective. Still, there are some common features. Let us see some of the vital characteristics. First, crisis affects an individual, group, organization, or society on the whole, and attention from stakeholders, customers, and media may be intense. The reaction may be intense. It is a sequence of sudden disturbing events that are going to harm the organization. It is sudden and it arises on a short notice. It is unpredictable. It triggers a fear and threat amongst the individuals, calls for urgent and timely decisions. Whenever a crisis is there, all the individuals, it may be the employees, the customers, they are threatened, they feel that a loss is going to occur, and thus the management needs to take timely decision. It creates a sense of loss of control on the total or partial system or things. Again, this is the feeling of fear. Crisis is a progressive process that may not be restricted to one area. There's a ripple effect in crisis. It can easily spread to other departments or areas as well. It may catch up rapidly and emerge with other crises, and its consequences are extended. For example, financial crisis, it can be engaged or it can add on to the marketing crisis. There may be a lack of clear information about what is happening. Crisis is a process of transformation where the old system can no longer be maintained. And finally, three elements are common to a crisis. These are a threat, a surprise, and a short decision time. So we can say that these are some of the common features of crisis. Herein, the common characteristics, this can tell us that it can be a physical danger, and the first priority of the organization should be to address that. It creates confusion, friction, pressure, and stress among the individuals. So a proper plan should be put in place as to how the managers are going to deal with it. Now we have the common causes or sources of crisis. For this, we can divide the types of crisis into two categories. First, we have a sudden crisis, and second, we have smoldering crisis. Sudden crisis, these are immediate onset. They tend to be unanticipated and they escalate very quickly. They are a triggering event or incident and may be out of the organization's control. That is, they can be either internal sources or external sources. Internal are specific to the organization. External may be something that has occurred in the industry or at the nation level. Whereas smoldering crisis here is that the organization and its stakeholders, the impact, it grows. Sometimes it is undetected over a period of time. The potential crisis may be missed, denied, or misunderstood, and then it grows. So it grows undeducted in the organization. Now we can state some of the common reasons because of which crisis can occur. First, these are the natural disasters. These include earthquakes, storms, tsunamis, and so on. Also, are mindful of social and political shocks like war, terrorism, or violent protest. Cyber attacks is a new reason. Herein, digital assets are vulnerable to cyber attacks. Many organizations have been hit by distributed denial of service. We have studied about this, or the data theft attacks, hacking. Then there is failure of technology. If there's technological failure and breakdown of machines, it can also lead to crisis. Problems in internet, corruption, errors, passwords, all of this can result in crisis. Then organizational misdeeds is another reason. If there is violence, theft, and terrorism at the workplace, then it can result in organizational crisis. Embezzlement of financial crisis. This can relate to a company's financial matters and often their tax affairs. Illegal behaviors such as accepting bribes, frauds, data tampering, confidentiality breach. This can also be a PR disaster for a company. Most customers, they regard it as unethical. Then failure in supply chain mechanism. A failure can also lead to stock shortages and empty shelves. Crisis can also arise when organization they fails to pay its creditors and declares itself as a bankrupt organization. Simply, it can be seen as a symptom of poor planning and bad infrastructure. Then safety scare could be another reason. People they quickly lose confidence in a company if the products are found to be defective. Here, a high profile product may have a safety issue. This can present a major brand risk and reputation loss. Staff issues are also a reason. Strikes and layoffs they lead to bad optics for the company. They create an impression of an ailing company that has lost the loyalty of its workforce. Crisis will arise when employees do not agree to each other and they fight amongst themselves. Finally, issues of disclosure. This is a new type of crisis that the companies have been facing. The particularly here it is important of influencer marketing. This can damage a brand and put its dishonesty. What is happening is the company can put up wrong information but using a influential figure that the customers are going to believe. In some cases, influencers or ambassadors they do not have sufficient knowledge about the product. It can damage a brand and put dishonesty on public display. So therefore, we can say that crisis doesn't necessarily need to emerge from a global event like a pandemic. There may be other types of crises also, and we need to be prepared for any of such sources. Next, we move on to crisis management. Now, no matter how many safeguards and processes the organization put in place, they could suddenly find themselves facing an unexpected crisis. Nonetheless, robust crisis management strategies and plans, if they are put in place, we can reduce the impact of a crisis. A crisis management is defined as an organization's pre-established activities and guidelines for preparing and responding to significant catastrophic events or incidents in a safe and effective manner. The other critical characteristics, let's say, of crisis management, it includes activities and processes that help managers as well as employees to analyze and understand the terms which might lead to crisis and uncertainty. Basically, we are preparing ourselves. We do not tend to stop a crisis from occurring, but more the focus is if a crisis occurs, how are we going to respond to it? So first, we need to see what are the events that might trigger a crisis. Second, it enables the managers and employees to respond effectively to changes in the organization so that these changes they do not lead to, let's say, internal protests. Then employees at the time of crisis must communicate effectively with each other and they try their level best to overcome the tough times. So communication is an important part of crisis management. HR also plays a crucial role. They evolve, lead, and execute all the crisis management strategies. It is the responsibility of the HR to see that the management policies that are put in place they are being implemented, and it consists of effective coordination among the departments to overcome emergency situations. So, a formal incident assessment team and process should be put in place. There should be the effective incident action planning, skills, and effective crisis management. All of these things they come under crisis management. It is very important that the people they do not panic or spread rumors around. People should be in regular touch with the employees, the external clients, stakeholders, and we should avoid being too rigid. One should adapt well to the changes and the new situations. So we have discussed how crisis management is important for the organizations in today's environment, but still majority of organizations worldwide do not have this crisis management. They are not designed to anticipate crisis or manage them effectively once they have occurred. So there's a dire need for evolving and executing proper crisis management strategies. Why such need is there? First, because crisis management prepares the individuals to face unexpected developments and adverse conditions. Like we said, a crisis, if not managed, on time and correctly can lead to disaster. It can be catastrophic. So to avoid that, crisis management is important so that individuals can deal with it with courage and determination. With a proper crisis management plan in place, employees adjust well to sudden changes in the organization. There is no threat. Then employees can also understand and analyze the causes of crisis and cope with it in the best possible way. It helps the managers to devise strategies to come out of uncertain conditions. Also, they can decide on the future course of action. Finally, crisis management helps the managers to feel the early signs of crisis, warn the employees against the aftermaths, and take necessary precautions for the said. Therefore, it can be observed that crisis management is a system of plans and processes that are designed to enable an organization to detect and minimize the potential harm posed by a crisis and subsequently learn from crises that arise. Now we will see the four levels of uncertainty and the strategies to manage. First is the level 1, which has a clear enough future. Herein the managers, they have the ability to develop a single forecast of the future. It will be precise enough for strategy development. Although it will be inexact to the degree, still it will be sufficiently narrow to point out to a single strategic decision. For example, if an airline company sees that a low cost competitor has entered the market, they can either respond by lowering their own costs or they can decide to focus on a niche customer base. Now, the strategy here will be used, that is the standard strategy toolkit. It involves market research conduction, analysis of competitors' cost and capacity, value chain analysis, and so on. Also, a discounted cash flow model will be used that incorporates these predictions, and then we can determine the value of various alternative strategies. So actually managers, they feel comfortable in the level 1 situation because these tools and frameworks are taught in every leading business program world over. So level 1 is not very problematic for the managers to handle. Then comes the level 2 uncertainty that has alternate futures. Here it is described that has a few alternate outcomes, not one single but few, or discrete scenarios as well. Here in the analysis, they cannot identify which outcome will occur, although they can establish the probabilities of certain outcomes more than one. Most important, if not all elements of the strategy would change if the outcome was predictable. Outcome is completely predictable in level 1, but herein a few, let's say 2 or 3 scenarios will be presented. Herein, many businesses are facing this level 2 uncertainty. So, the strategy that can be used, first, the managers must develop a set of discrete scenarios that are based on their understanding the past events. For example, whether deregulation occurs or not, a competitor builds a new plant or not. Then each scenario may require a different valuation model. For each of the scenario, a different valuation model will be created, and often it will be fundamentally different depending on which scenario is going to occur. So alternative valuations, they should also be handled, they should be created, because a single baseline model will not be applied to all of the scenarios or all of the probabilities. In level 2 situation, it is important not only to identify the different possible future outcomes but also the likely paths that the industry must or might take to reach those alternative futures. So we need to decide the probabilities, also the steps. As events they unfold and the relative probabilities they change, it is likely that one strategy will also be needed to be adapted to these changes. Then at level 3, a range of possible futures or potential futures can be identified. This range is defined by a limited number of key variables, but the actual outcome may lie anywhere along the continuum. Let's say we can, for example, take a scale of maximum and minimum. In between, several levels or several futures can be stated. So there are no natural discrete scenarios. For example, companies that are emerging industries or they're entering new geographical markets, they often face the level 3 uncertainty. The best possible market research might identify only a broad range of potential customer penetration. Then the company, if let's say they're entering in India, they need to follow a different strategy, a more aggressive strategy in terms of technology, profitability, all of these things. So how can we manage level 3 uncertainty? Scenarios that describe the extreme points in the range of possible outcomes are often relatively easy to develop, but these rarely provide much concrete guidance. We can easily say, let's say, maximum customer retention can be 10% or minimum can be 2%. But between this, many possibilities can be there. Since there are no other natural discrete scenarios, deciding which possible outcome should be fully developed into alternate scenarios in a real art. It is creating complete list of scenarios. Rather than that, we calculate the expected value of different strategies. So what we do here is that the range of scenarios that are established should allow the managers to determine how robust their strategy is. They are identifying the likely winners or losers, and they determine roughly the risk of following the status quo strategy. So they are roughly creating it, not exact calculations, but a rough idea. So these are the level 3 uncertainty, which have a range of futures in which we cannot make exact or even near predictions. And then we have the highest level of uncertainty, which is the true ambiguity. Herein, multiple dimensions of uncertainty, they interact to create an environment which is actually impossible to predict. We cannot predict the future. Herein, unlike the level 3 situations, the range of potential outcomes, they cannot be identified, let alone the scenarios that we did in the level 1 and level 2. So it might not even be possible to identify all the relevant variables also that will define the future. Now these situations are quite rare. They tend to migrate towards one of the other or the other levels over time. Nonetheless, they do exist. These are rare, but they do exist. For example, a telecommunication company, if they want to decide where and how to compete in the emerging customer multimedia market, so there are multiple uncertainties like technology, demand, hardware, content providers. So it is actually unpredictable and no plausible range of scenarios can be identified. Still, what we can do is to strategize it. It is even more qualitative. Even if it is impossible to develop a meaningful set of probable or even possible outcomes, managers can gain valuable strategic perspectives, but they will be qualitative. Usually, they can identify at least a subset of the variables that will determine how the market would evolve over time. For example, customer penetration rates, technology, performance attributes. They're not exactly calculating quantitatively but qualitatively that these might affect the quantity of risk returns of different strategies, also identify what information they would have to believe about the future, and then they can identify the favorable and unfavorable indicators that will let them track the market's evolution over time, also help them adapt their strategy as new information becomes available. So it may be observed from these discussions that uncertainty, it demands more flexible approach to the situation analysis. Thus, one size fits all approach is simply inadequate when we are dealing with these levels of uncertainties. Now we move on to the VUCA approach, that is the gravity driven approach to uncertainty and crisis management. Now the world of constant change, we need to denote the gravity, that is what is the level of such uncertainties. And VUCA represents a set of challenges that individuals, teams, managers and organizations they can face when working in a atmosphere. Individually, these challenges they can be significant, but they are still formidable when they are combined. So VUCA, it stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This type of situation, it was first observed during the post-Cold War period that the VUCA concept emerged to explain the promising new world dynamics. So it is important point, it emerged during the post-Cold War period. Worldwide instability, rapid changes, and emergence of technological transformations. These are some of the characteristics that are attributed to this scenario. So this term VUCA is now used to describe the technological and cultural changes as well as their impact on the daily lives of people and companies. Here, this term became more popular in the 2000s because of crisis management, precisely with significant technological changes took place, invention and dissemination of the internet was there. So, VUCA, it is going to represent the set of challenges that individuals, teams, managers and organizations in the affected industries they have to face. Now, it has four distinct types of challenges that we discussed: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now, we will discuss the different features of the VUCA approach. First, we have V, that stands for volatility. It refers to the speed of change in an industry, market, or the world in general. How volatile a market industry it is. It is associated with the fluctuations. A more volatile market has more fluctuations in, let's say, demand. The more volatile the world is, the faster the things are getting changed. And the challenge here is unexpected or unstable. It may be unknown duration, but it is not necessarily hard to understand. We can say that a particular market is volatile, but we do have knowledge about it. For example, commodity pricing is often quite volatile. Illustration is jet fuel, that costs have been quite volatile in the 21st century. Then we have U, that stands for uncertainty. It is the people's inability to understand. They are not sure about the situation. These environments are those that do not allow for any predictions to be made. We do not understand them. The more uncertain or vague the world is, the harder it is to predict the future. Here is a lack of knowledge as to how an event will have meaningful ramifications. The cause and effect, although, are understood, but it is unknown as to whether this effect will create significant changes. So there is uncertainty, people are not sure. For example, anti-terrorism initiatives, these are generally plagued with uncertainty. We understand many causes of terrorism, but we do not know how exactly or how they could spur attacks. So this is volatility and uncertainty. Then we have C, that stands for complexity. It is the level of difficulty. It refers to the number of factors we need to consider to make more efficient decisions. Then their veracity and the relationships between them. More the factors, greater is the complexity, greater is the variety, and the more interconnected they are, the more complex the environment. In today's globalization environment, more interconnected nations are there, markets are there, it is creating complexity. For example, doing the business in many geographies that have unique regulatory environment, tariffs, and cultural values will make it complex for the management to decide their strategy. And finally, A stands for ambiguity. It relates to the lack of clarity about how to interpret something. It is not about analyzing the large amount of data, it is rather about advanced analytics for the right types of, let's say, key performance indicators. Here, the relationships are completely unclear and no precedents are available. The situation is confusing, it is ambiguous. For example, when information is incomplete, it is contradictory or too imprecise to draw clear conclusions. For example, when a company is deciding to shift to an unknown or emerging market or business and or launching the products in which no competitions or no competencies are available, it will create ambiguity. We do not know about the situation. So these are the characteristics of VUCA scenario. These four levels are there. Now about the enormity of VUCA environment. If we go about the probable impact of a VUCA scenario on business, it is rather difficult to predict what is the extent and scale as to how manage VUCA world. Still, the organization they should know and be aware of the changes. Now, here some of the negative effects of VUCA environment are: it destabilizes people and makes them anxious about the future, which affects the organization's culture adversely at present. They're constantly thinking about the future. It can also undermine the employee motivation and frustrate their career movements. Thereby, it devastates the individuals and the organizations at large. It creates a situation of uncertainty. So the employees they are not exactly motivated to involve in more career development. They are demotivated. It necessitates the constant training on acquiring new skills, knowledge, and attitudes that would be helpful in solving such situations. Managing VUCA scenario requires good amount of precious time and effort, thereby it endangers long-term projects, innovations and development endeavors because most of the energy and time is involved in developing the VUCA scenario. It involves occasional chances of making inappropriate decisions, thereby it adversely affects the decision making. Sometimes the decisions that are made are not correct, and these incorrect or inappropriate decisions, it can furthermore make the process and pattern even more lengthy. Overall, it can destabilize the organization and it affects the business because people they tend to passively leave the organization for greener postures outside. They look for better opportunities that have stable environment. So, in the view of above adverse impact of VUCA on environment, organization, and people, when organization they experience this environment, it has to initiate and fasten the appropriate actions as to how they can face and overcome this scenario with the collective effort of all the stakeholders. Now we will see the leadership strategies to manage the VUCA scenario. Although VUCA might seem inescapable in certain industries, still it can manage itself and may mitigate its adverse effects by turning into opportunities. Let us see what is the role of leadership in this. First, counter volatility with vision. Organizations they should accept and embrace change as a constant unpredictable future. They should not try to run away or avoid change. They should accept it. Leaders for this should evolve, implement, and execute robust business model that can outperform technology. If because of increasing technology and advancing, leaders should also encourage and motivate the teams with the spirit of achieving it together and inclusively. Then leaders should ensure that the resources are aggressively directed towards building slack and creating the predictable or potential future flexibility. That is, we know that there is volatility, but still we have a clear vision as to how we are going to deal with them. Now, wherever there is volatility or high volatility, the team spirit and interpersonal relationships should be at the peak level. There should be trust between employer and the employee. Coordination and linkages, these are critical. For this, leaders and managers should concentrate on evolving and establishing robust communication channels between all the stakeholders. Then, since a change in the business vertical may lead to opportunities in other business area also. For this, leaders and managers they should carefully, closely monitor these developments. So, if we have a clear vision, then we can counter the volatile situation. Second level is uncertainty that can be dealt with better understanding. In the situation, the organization they need to pause, to listen, to look around. They need to aim to anticipate the future threats and opportunities. For this, the leader and manager should ensure a robust mentoring program is there with the sole focus on new approaches and prospects that are likely to attract new, young, and creative talents. They should also lay more emphasis on priority as to how the new and contemporary learning endeavors can be created, how they can harness the skills and new insights of the people. They should create a better understanding of the opportunities present in the environment. It should also focus on planning of new business ways, how they can minimize the possible uncertainties. If there are uncertainties, it would lead to demotivation among the employees. But leadership, if they provide proper training and opportunities, we can avoid such situations. Leadership should also ensure periodical environmental screening. We need to constantly monitor. If there are situations of uncertainty, immediate steps should be taken to eliminate it. The level of uncertainty will definitely decrease when the desired results are promptly predicted and achieved. Finally, information dissemination is important. It is critical to reducing uncertainty. So, leaders should steer the organizations to move beyond the existing information source. They should gather new data and consider it from new perspective. Communication is important here. Communication should be there. It should predict the current and future uncertain events. Efforts towards change should be made. Reduced tolerance or rapid acquisition of knowledge, etc. This will ensure collaboration, decision making processes. So, addressing uncertainty with understanding. Next is complexity that can be dealt with by responding with clarity. At this stage, effective communication with abundant clarity. Also, timeliness is important. Hence, they need to communicate clearly with its people, as clearly expressed communication and information will help the people and their teams to understand their goals, objectives, also what is the direction of their future movements. Herein, leaders and managers should ensure simplification of each work process. Then, they should be aware of the social networks within the organization that are often stronger than the hierarchy. These are the informal networks that are created. Leaders should, for this, take proactive steps to achieve required congruence, coordination, and cooperation between all of the essential elements of the organization. They should here effective communication channels should be developed, well designed decision making policies, empowerment schemes should be there. Within the organization, the leaders need to have the flexibility and tolerance to think in contrast and out of the box. They should encourage inverse thinking abilities. They should encourage people to bring in their opinions and suggestions, viable solutions that are generating innovative strategies. Finally, restructuring internal company operations so as to match the external complexity is the most effective and efficient way to address complexity. That is, the organizations, they should match their own operations and processes to mirror the environmental complexities. For this, the leaders can infuse new specialized talents in various contemporary verticals. Also, they can build up resources that are adequate to address complexity. Finally, to overcome ambiguity, the leaders should have agility with which they are dealing. So, the phenomena of ambiguity differs from the phenomena of volatility and complexity. The results of specific causes and action paths, they are quite difficult to identify. This leads to confusion. For this, the leadership should promote flexibility, transparency, adaptability, and agility in their activities. They should plan ahead in time, also ensure that such plans are resilient to periodical changes. They should hire, develop, and promote talents who have interest and they thrive in the VUCA scenarios. These people are likely to be collaborative, comfortable with ambiguity and change. They have critical and innovative thinking skills. Leaders should also encourage the people to be versatile in all the areas by providing them the right and timely opportunities to work in all areas of business and administration. Here, their own areas of core competency. Apart from that, job rotation, cross training, they can also improve team agility as well as their capability. Leaders should lead their team members with a sense of developing their skills and abilities, but they should not dictate or control. They should not find faults with their work. They should act as a friend, philosopher, and guide to the subordinates. Experimentation is necessary for reducing ambiguity. Only through intelligent experimentation can make leaders to determine what strategies are and are not beneficial in the situation. Finally, leaders should suitably reward the team members and allow them to see what kind of behavior is greatly valued by highlighting the innovations and calculated risk taking moves. So, all this, the members who demonstrate vision, understanding, clarity, and agility, they will prove to be beneficial when managing the VUCA scenario. Next topic is evolution of the Bani approach. Now we discussed that the VUCA approach, it emerged in the post Cold War situation, but now the current circumstances, they no longer match with what was predicted in the VUCA model. It was basically a scenario of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, but it does create meaning in the face of uncertainties. Still, it has lost its significance. It is not possible now under the VUCA scenario to provide useful insights. Factors such as today's scenario, global warming, changes in politics, widely used technologies, pandemics, and other elements, they're contributing more. Thus, a new or better model is the need, which is called the Bani approach. In other words, we can say that no longer a VUCA environment, and it has evolved, which calls for a new terminology or a new language that is going to explain the changed world, or which will make sense to figure out the potential future scenarios. For example, in the COVID-19 pandemic, it created a scenario that made even the VUCA seem an insufficient descriptor. Thus, the need was felt, and a new acronym, Bani, has been coined by American anthropologist. You need to remember this name, Jamais Cascio. They developed it to explain and deal with the new normal that is created by these challenges like global warming, COVID-19, also such unforeseen crises in the future. So this Bani, it is different from VUCA. An acronym stands for brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. Let us understand the concepts and the characteristics of the Bani approach. First characteristics of the Bani approach is B, that stands for brittle. Brittle means something that is hard or strong on the inside, but it is actually very easily broken. That is, we cannot predict or predetermine beyond a particular point, and here we are susceptible to catastrophe at any time. That is, the businesses are built on fragile foundations. Now, a brittle system, it may work well on the surface or on the outside, but it is always on the verge of breaking down for good. So the foundations are not very strong. Second characteristic is that it is anxious. Anxiety is one of the most present symptoms today, not just in our personal life, but in the job market as well. We are living on the edge. It creates a sense of urgency, and this urgency, when it guides decision making, can lead to wrong decisions. Now, anxiety can be caused by continuous changes in our personal and professional life as well. If you are anxious, you will also feel helpless and unable to make correct decisions. In if even if any amount of information is available, these decisions may turn out terribly wrong. However, when generally anxiety is involved, the environment is shaped by anxiety. Point is to learn how we can deal with these circumstances in a productive way. Basically, the organizations, they can canvas a positive view on things, and we can do so by being clear in our own minds. We should not wait, or we should not expect a disaster. We should work rather on how we can fight with this anxiety. Third is N, that stands with non-linear, a world whose events seem disconnected and disproportionate. Now, there's a great difference between the scale at which things occur and the scale at which we perceive them. Therefore, detailed long-term planning may no longer make sense, as cause and effect is no longer accessible in advance. That is, we might create a very comprehensive long-term plan, but it is not necessary that it is always successful, because cause and effect is not now as predictable as it was in the past. Without a well-defined and standardized structure, it is not possible to make structured organization. So these disconnection and disproportion between cause and effect, it leads to a non-linear situation. The basic logic of what we know as a linear cause effect has become non-linear, and they do not quite fit well together. It is not necessary that one particular cause will have this particular effect in future. Finally, we have I, that stands for incomprehensible. Now we have discussed about the non-linear result of any cause, event or decision. They often seem to lack any kind of logic or purpose. That is, it is incomprehensible. We sometimes fail to understand why such situation occurred. This renders investigation simply ludicrous, and we cannot make sense of it. We are not able to understand. Misunderstanding is here generated when we find answers, but the answers don't make sense to us. We are like, how can this cause lead to this effect? So incomprehensibility occurs when consequence of, let's say, excess information is there, and it is often counterintuitive in nature. So we need to understand that we do not have control over everything. Incomprehensibility occurs as a consequence of excessive information. Fortunately, what is incomprehensible today does not necessarily have to be tomorrow. We can take steps, we can filter out more relevant information, and then we can take better decisions. So these are the characteristics of a new current Bani approach. Now we will see the strategies that can be used to deal with a Bani scenario. So as the Bani scenario, it creates a feeling of fragility. So the best way is to adapt and grow by strengthening the terms with the enough resources in terms of human, finance and skills. That is, the organization, they should recruit more skilled individuals who are equipped with such scenarios, who have experience in past as to how they can deal with anxiety and skills, finance, proper equipment should be there. Then seeking a culture of collaboration, adopting well distributed structures, investing in training. This can make the organization more resilient. That is, we have a culture that is going to contribute and collaborate to any change rather than creating rumors. Implementing a collaborative culture can increase the communication and transparency between individuals, teams, department. People who are more readily working together, they are supporting each other, are going to contribute more to the organization's health. Then dealing with anxiety, it requires more empathy. It is a qualitative nature, subjective nature. Hence, training employees in soft skills, which will become increasingly essential as to if they see if someone is facing anxiety, how they should talk to them, how they should deal with such situation, can also help to dispel the anxieties among the employees about the future challenges and the changes. In a non-linear world, rigid plans, they tend to be a burden on the business. Hence, constant innovation and creativity in the product and services, these are very important. Organizations should be flexible. Organizations that don't innovate and they rely only on the proven or contemporary methods of doing things, they often make them incongruent. They find themselves behind in the race of competition. So flexibility, adaptability is important. One very important thing is to address or remove misunderstanding. It can be effectively addressed through the use of technology like artificial intelligence, big data, and data science. If misunderstanding is not removed on a timely basis, then it can lead to major crisis. Brittleness, it can be addressed with resilience, flexibility, and alternative plans and systems. Solid plans should be created. Although the systems are presently working well, still we need to always evolve an alternated system that is going to be resilient for the future challenges. We also need to think about a sustainable plan that is going to help us in the future. Anxiety, it can be addressed with more awareness, empathy, and mindfulness. We can we cannot manage something if we cannot control it. So we need to have a sense of control. We should know that although we are facing anxiety, it is under our control. Non-linearity, it can be addressed with providing more context, flexibility, and no expectation. We should always maintain a fresh vision and be candid. We should be open to approach so that we can cope with events, people, and technology as the situation arises. Finally, incomprehensibility can be addressed with transparency and intuition. When something is confusing or incomprehensible, we can't wait to fully explore what's happening before making a decision. So, we should develop our own instinct and perception on such matters, and we should try to rely on it securely. So Bani, it allows for more accurate prediction of present and the future scenarios. It also paves the way for an approach to make the world more comprehensible and resilient. So exactly what we were talking about and the deficiencies of VUCA, it is covered in Bani. So with this new understanding of varied and most unpredictable global challenges, organizations, they can better prepare themselves for what lies ahead. Now, often there arises a question and a dilemma as to what will determine whether VUCA or Bani or let's say some other alternative should be used in today's world. Conceptually, both these scenarios they work well and they're appealing. But when it comes to approach a particular concept, then the organization shall weigh the attending circumstances and then they should decide as to which version has been getting more acceptance and it will be the one that best connects it with the particular vision of reality. So it depends on the situation which is to be the vision of the organization. It is not a concrete idea, rather it depends on the particular circumstance. So there has always been an uncertainty about the future changes and their scale. There's a fear of unknown and anxiety about their consequences, their ideologies, today's time religions, methods, processes, all of these things they create anxiety and uncertainty. Given the fact that the present and future of our lives are more progress driven in terms of more access to the resources or more knowledge driven intelligence, advanced technology, it can be said that either of the two visions can provide valid elements as to how we can attend the scenarios, but by simultaneously addressing two important fundamentals. It is the variability and the acceleration. Now the world, it is definitely changing, dynamic, and more challenges are faced by the organizations today. So we need to see which approach is going to suit best for the particular circumstance on the basis of variability and acceleration of the crisis. Now, although the world is much more homogeneous than ever, dramatic change is seen in our beliefs, biodiversity, landscape, and social organization. Even the person's personal experiences, they are more varied than in the past. Since organizations are the byproducts of the society, there has been an enormous amount of knowledge, techniques, tools that are constantly growing in today's environment. So it is also a fact that change is accelerated even when there are no special moments that support it. This point is also important. Change will always be there. So the potential challenge to the organization is to deal with variability, that is uncertainty, non-linear, ambiguous and incomprehensible. Also acceleration, that is volatile, anxious, complex and fragile. Both of these factors, whether it is variability and acceleration, both of these have to be dealt with. Variability brings new visions like Bani, and acceleration contributes to making VUCA feel obsolete. So we can say that both VUCA and Bani, they offer various insights through which we can decodify what's happening around us and we can be prepared to cope with it. We can use the same acronyms to also describe the ability that is needed to respond to each of the element. For example, in the case of, let's say, VUCA, here we can say that four components are volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. We discussed to deal with them, we need vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. In reality, though, these abilities are not so easy to find and they sound a bit simple, they may even be sometimes illogical. But still, both of these situations can be used, and the main conclusion as to VUCA or Bani is that it depends on the particular circumstance of the organization. With this, we have come to the end of this lesson. Keep learning with us. Thank you.